Occupational Health Central Market, Dr. Courtland Keteyian. Good morning.
Hi.
Or good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Is it a big deal for you?
I can't wait. Yeah, we have big family get together. So there'll be like 30, 35 people. It's great. Yeah.
And you went to college back east, Ivy Leaguer, so do you toss football around on the front yard like the Kennedys?
We'll do a little like the Kennedys. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of that. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of that. That game was this weekend too. So Yale beat Harvard on Saturday. So I was pleased.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got victories from all my teams. Lions won, Michigan won, and Yale won. So I was happy guy.
Yeah, big weekend.
Yep.
So, well, I mentioned Kennedy, so let's just start with that. RFK Jr., the nominee to head the Health and Human Services Department by President-elect Trump. It's one of the appointments that's become controversial. For one reason, I think, is his stance on vaccines, where our federal government has just consistently promoted vaccines, the safety, the value. He seems to be a skeptic. Does his potential appointment concern you?
So I think that with Kennedy, and I'm sure this is true of all cabinet appointees. Other places where I'm it's not my area of expertise, right? But with HHS. So there's other, like the FDA is within HHS, and I think that Bobby Kennedy made a name for himself really recently because of the pandemic and because of his sort of no mandate approach to vaccines. I don't think he's ever advocated that people shouldn't get vaccinated. I think he's really advocated it should be their choice, right? And you can debate whether that is reasonable or not. I think in some vaccines that makes sense. And others where you need herd immunity to prevent, make a choice in measles is like maybe not the best strategy because you need herd immunity to prevent measles, right? Same thing with polio, right? So we've pretty much eradicated polio except when we stop vaccinating people and then polio comes back. And people forget what it's like to have, people paralyzed. It's a devastating disease, right? Smallpox, right? We don't even know smallpox. Those of us alive today, right? It's not something we think about, but that's a disease that killed and maimed millions and millions of people over history, right? That we eradicated with vaccines. So, choose vaccine or not when the goal is eradicating a disease that kills a lot of people. Obviously, that doesn't align with sort of public health. I would say best practice, but what's interesting about Bobby Kennedy, I think, is going to be where he focuses. His whole career was really about, he was suing companies that were polluting the environment, companies that, make foods, and there are things in our foods and in our environment here that aren't allowed in other countries. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see if he's able to get that type of regulatory reform in the food and environmental space, which I think is a very positive step, right? I think there's things here that, the U.S. is a country that we are sicker and more overweight than every other country comparably in the world, and I think there's something to the fact that there are things in our food supply that make us sick. And so I think it's really interesting, actually. The other thing I should say on the vaccine part is, generally speaking, vaccine mandates occur at the state level. So the mandate to, vaccinate children that go to school, unless you have a religious exemption, things like that. Those are state level regulations, not federal. So obviously federal agencies and federal government has ways to influence state policy through funding and other, mechanisms like that. But a lot of the sort of, vaccine policy actually happens at the state. So there may be some, limitations or, challenges in terms of how they would influence vaccine policy, whereas things like food and agriculture, there's much more direct ways to influence that the federal government has.
And one of those areas where we've been seeing some serious problems with food safety which is, I think, surprising, where we see respected companies that have a product that suddenly they're recalling it because it has contamination.
Right.
E. coli, I think, is what is the most common.
Yeah, so this just happened. It's been about the last 2 weeks. So the CDC has a health alert network, and they had an advisory because of organic carrots. So sold at places like Whole Foods and Kroger, and right, they sort of supply a lot of different brands that are the kind of the white labeled house brand of organic, right? So I mean the list is really long. It was like Trader Joe's, Kroger, Whole Foods, and so these are like organic baby carrots, organic full-size carrots, and they were contaminated with E. coli, which can cause usually in healthy people, if they get it, it's kind of a food poisoning type thing, right? You get usually sort of like abdominal bloating, pain, diarrhea, maybe a fever, but it can make some people very ill and actually cause kidney failure. And there's been a few deaths related to it actually. So it can have really catastrophic consequences. And so if you have organic carrots in your fridge, you should definitely throw them away and get new carrots. Technically, if you cooked the carrots, it would be fine, but it'd be better just to toss them.
And washing them doesn't help.
Washing won't necessarily help. So you'd have to cook them. You have to cook them, obviously, heat up and kill the bacteria, or just toss it. Get
Now,
some new ones.
when you buy produce and it says already washed, like bagged lettuce, do you wash it again?
I do actually.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I do actually. I try to grow a lot of my own vegetables actually in my spare time in my garden. But in the winter, you're kind of stuck. You got to get vegetables from somewhere. So, I tend to wash it again. Yeah.
Boar's Head meats. We've had. It's been the parade of health warnings because of contamination. It's just nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty pervasive problem right now, and I don't know why that is. It seems like these things are happening more frequently than they used to, but it's a significant problem, and even and some. I mean, I think some companies should get credit for when they respond really well. Like actually, so McDonald's actually just had a recent case of E. coli contamination, and it was in the onions that were used on, I think, Quarter Pounders. I didn't realize they had different onions for Quarter Pounders or Big Macs, but it was these specific. So McDonald's, acted very quickly, and they pulled all the onions out of all of their stores, right? But it seems to be happening more and more that it's difficult to sort of trust, some of these sources of food.
All right, here we come. Winter, the season where we see increases in certain illnesses.
Yeah.
It's just every year, right?
Yep. Yeah, so exactly. And it kind of happens at two stages. Like there's the kind of the kids go back to school stage, right? Where kids get sick and then everybody else gets sick, right? Because everybody's at school again and sort of transmitting disease that way. And then once we get into this kind of holiday season, right, around Thanksgiving and Christmas. There's actually a lot of things right about this time that sort of, get people sick. I think there's folks with chronic diseases that end up, eat too much salt and end up in the hospital with a heart failure exacerbation, things like that. That happens too. But yeah, very commonly everyone gets together and there's runny noses and things like that. And so I think we have to be sort of hyper aware now, especially if you have people that are, a little older, may not do as well, and just be careful. One thing that's important to know is if people are getting vaccinated, it takes at least 2 weeks for the immunity from the vaccine to really kick in. You don't get vaccinated on a Friday and then you're immune on a Saturday. So it's at least 2 weeks, even up to 4, depending on the type of vaccine. So anybody who hasn't gotten vaccinated, now's a good time to do it, so that you're kind of ready as you get into the holiday season.
Yeah, and all those things, because of COVID, washing your hands, social distancing, it seems to, it's stuck with people. I think, from what I've been able to see.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that people are a little more conscientious of hand washing. It's interesting, even when I'm in clinic, patients are more understanding of, you kind of would shake people's hand. I mean, this is like, I remember doing this as a med student, right? You go in, you introduce yourself, shake somebody's hand. And now it's like, it's kind of acceptable to not do that. And I think people understand that, like, that's how you transmit, infectious material. And so they're like, okay, that's okay. And it's kind of normal to see people, if you have a runny nose, wearing a mask or something, just as kind of like a common courtesy to really, this is actually sort of an important point, is those surgical masks people wear, right? They're really good at actually preventing spread of infection. So, maybe you've got holiday plans and everybody's coming into town and you can't move things and somebody gets sick. Putting one person in a mask to prevent them from spreading to everyone else it's very effective. It's very, very, very effective. Those surgical masks work really well to prevent spread of virus. So, kind of one of the things you can do if you got folks coming over.
Yeah, and I think our attitude, we understand now that, hey, they're doing it for you, not for them. Right. When you see someone wearing a mask, right. Your whole outlook, your attitude against them,
Yeah, it does. There's kind of like a weird social construct around wearing masks now, but I mean, I think it's really it's a very courteous thing if somebody's under the weather. Like, I mean, I do this, like, I'll be seeing patients, I'll see, a dozen people a day or something, and if I'm, not well, like, I'll put a mask on. I'm not going to make everybody sick because they have to come in and see the doctor, right? That's not right. So.
All right, well, we want everyone to be safe all the time and healthy, but particularly during the holiday season. A lot of people, 80 million people will be traveling this week.
There's a lot of travel. Yeah, a lot of travel. And one last point on the vaccines is the age for the pneumococcal, the pneumonia vaccine, was lowered from 65 to 50. That just happened within the last month. So people may not have heard that. You may have went in for your appointment with your doctor, annual visit, and that hadn't changed yet. And so that's a good thing to know, because it used to be the case to get it when you were under 65, you had a chronic disease, right? And now that's not the case. It's just the recommendation. So that's a very effective vaccine, prevents pneumonia, people getting into the hospital. It's about 75% effective. It's very effective. So just a good one to know, because that's a recent change from ACIP.
All right, thanks for all the updates, and thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
From Henry Ford, Dr. Courtland Keteyian.